Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for attending this webinar session. Can everyone hear me? And if so, can you actually give me a thumbs up? You have an emoji here. Awesome. Managing a growing customer base is not an easy job, but it is a good problem to have, and it comes with great responsibility. My name is Irina Chismash. I'm head of marketing at Castify, and today I team up with Jennifer Chiang, which is the author of the book, The Startup Guide to Customer Success, and also head of customer success and CESO. And in the following hour, we will try to crack the code of scaling customer success operations. Before we dive into Jennifer's presentation, I want to address a few housekeeping items. All the lines are muted for a better listening experience. We have the question tab. Please, on the bottom right of your device, please feel free to ask questions. We'll try to answer all of them, or as many as we can, depending on timing. We reserved a generous time at the end of the presentation. A recording of this event will be sent to all of you who registered, and we'll also publish the transcript of the event on our blog. Jennifer, thank you for accepting our invitation and being our guest in today's webinar. I know the audience is eager to listen to your presentation. I am as well. So I suggest we dive in directly, and I'll pass it to you. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Irina, for the wonderful introduction. Super, super excited to be talking to you guys today about what customer success and it looks like, especially when it comes to scaling. As Irina said, my name is Jennifer. I am the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Startup's Guide to Customer Success, also the head of customer success at CISO. And before CISO, I was the head of customer success at Yelp. I'm a veteran of startups specializing in early stage. So that is your pre-seed, seed stage, Series A, Series B startups. You can find me oftentimes consulting at early stage startups and startup accelerators to really help folks kind of build their customer success functions and so that they can bring in and most importantly, retain customers. I've created customer success teams from zero multiple times and helped to reorganize, refocus, and refresh customer organizations to help get focus back in the game. Of course, throughout all of this work, I've worn multiple hats from being responsible for sales motions, owning support functions, and building internal data infrastructure. After all, that's startup life. I love that everyone's putting in where they're calling in from. In the chat, I'm currently based out of the San Francisco Bay Area, but have lived over half my life, or actually around almost half my life, on the East Coast and a few years outside the United States. Now that you know a little bit more about me, I do have a quick poll just to get to know you guys better. Let's see if we can get this going.
Do you want me, Jennifer, to publish it?
Yes, that'd be great.
Awesome. So we have the first poll. Can everyone see it?
Awesome. So love that we have almost half of you guys are also heads of customer success. That's awesome. We got some CSMs in the house. Love it. We have startup founders, non-customer success folks, customer success ops folks. This is going to be such a fun day. I'm so excited. Let's go ahead and put up our next poll, actually.
Okay, one sec. Publish poll.
Yeah, so let's see how many startups we have here today. All right, awesome. Not surprisingly, as some of the folks really follow me on LinkedIn and see that I talk a lot about startups, we have almost everyone is from a startup here. Love that so much. And we also got some people from VCs and outside the startup space. So everyone's welcome. I think there's still a lot of really, really great tips and tricks for everyone, though I will say for startups is a lot more applicable. All right, we have one more poll. If we can get that going as well.
Yep.
All right, and this is all about what are some of the customer success scaling challenges that you're facing today? I mean, we're all here to talk about mistakes to avoid and let's get all on the same page of where we are at. So let's go ahead and, it's a multiple choice, or not multiple choice, it's multi-select. So go ahead and choose as many as apply. Awesome, awesome. So I'm seeing here, a quarter of us have too many things to do and not enough time. Hey, I feel like I'm on the same boat. And next it's like we have a tie or triple tie for hiring, setting up new hires for success, getting good data, as well as retention. Of course, these are all things that we are here to help, really help with as customer success functions. And I'm just so excited to be having these discussions with you today. All right, let's go ahead and get started with some more. And now that we know a little bit about ourselves. So today, there's the slide. So today we'll be talking all about customer success, building customer success, particularly if you're, as you're setting up the foundation for scaling, as well as scaling and how to measure. Throughout today, I will also be sprinkling in some common mistakes that I see young customer success teams do in each of these sections. I also want to hear and help you guys on what is the most pressing thing on your mind. So we'll also be sure to leave plenty of time for Q&A as well. So please do start thinking of any and all questions that you may have and putting them in the question section as you think of them. So let's go ahead and get started. Oh, wow, we have so many people from all over Colombia, Paris, Germany, Greece. Wow, I love this. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's talk about how to build customer success foundations so that you can scale. When building customer success, it is really, really easy to get distracted by all the things that you need to do, and really easy to also get overwhelmed very quickly. And from, hiring, building relationships with internal stakeholders, building playbooks, segmentation, working with customers, managing renewals, and, I think you guys can probably all help me make the list even longer and longer. And, not to mention all the fires that just come up at the most inconvenient times. And so how do we build strong foundations for our customer success teams so that we can scale more quickly? I gave the answer away in my agenda, but this is where focus comes in. There is a focus that comes with prioritization, understanding how you can spend your time in the most effective way possible to push customer objectives forward. But within that, there's also different objectives to focus based on the stakeholder. And it really is important to get these right. So 3 focuses, essentially. To build a good foundation for scaling, I really recommend focusing on these 3 things in this order. So first, on the customer success team level, it is important to understand your charter. Also known, what is the purpose of your team in the eyes of the customer? So without understanding how you fit into the customer's puzzle, you are more likely to be scaling in the wrong direction or getting inconclusive results more often. Everyone and everything must be rooted in the customer and to be delivering true value. That also includes not delivering so much that it can take away from the core value or muddle your core value. A little bit more on that in a moment. Next, on the company team level, you must have a strong focus on championing the customer. This means that you should be getting buy-in from your leadership as well as your whole company around the power of customer success. And, without the buy-in of the power of customer success, you're going to be spending exponentially more energy and effort. So, these relationships are key for scaling. Lastly, for customers, you want to focus on architecting a complete customer experience. How are you planning to wow your customers and create evangelists in the long term? And without clear understanding of this, the full, complete customer experience, you're going to be building a plane while flying it. And, that's not great for you, your team, your business, or the customers. So each of these things are critical to have in place before you can really scale. And, when I work with startups, that are struggling to scale their customer success operations, it's usually because they have one of these focuses are not in place. So let's go ahead and dive into each of these in a little bit more detail. So the first thing is really understanding your charter. So simply put, what is the purpose of your team? And in my book, The Startup's Guide to Customer Success, I talk about a simple framework to help any team determine this, which, the management consultant in me has plotted into a 2x2 matrix. On one axis, we have product complexity. This is referring to how complex your product is for your customer to use. So, for example, I would say Salesforce is really high in product complexity. There's even special roles for Salesforce administrators and Salesforce engineers because it's just such a complex product just to even implement. An example of how something is low in product complexity could be like a document tracking system. Of course, this is not to say that these things are simple, but rather on the user side, it is easy to use and understand. I have a document, it tracks how many views and clicks there are. Much simpler than Salesforce. Going back to our chart, we can also see that the other axis we have is something called user complexity, which refers to how deeply or emotionally your product impacts your customer. So for example, a picture retouching tool has a lower user complexity because if, say, the service goes down, I can probably wait or hack a workaround. But however, a product like a dog walking service has a much higher user complexity because if anything were to happen to my dog, I would be incredibly upset, and I'm sure you guys would too. After we figure out where your company lies on this, it will tell you kind of like what your charter is. Automate, revolutionize, simplify, or delight. In my book, I also include this fun quiz that you can take with your company to understand where your company falls on this matrix. I also heard of CS teams having all CSMs complete this quiz together to kind of see where their consensus is. Also, it's kind of fun. To quickly go through each of these 4 quadrants, I'm not going to go into these in so much detail, but for companies that are high in both product and user complexity, so that top right-hand corner, the customer success team's focus is to really revolutionize the way to think about a problem that your product will help them solve and to help guide them throughout that journey. For those that are not so high in product complexity, but high in user complexity, so that's that bottom right-hand corner, the customer success team's focus is to really delight your customers so that they feel valued and taken care of, and so that your users, trust you with something that's very dear to them. And then for companies that are high in product complexity, but low in user complexity, so that top left-hand corner, the customer success team's focus is then to automate. Automate processes that have been headaches for your customers so that they can be more efficient. And last but certainly not least, for companies that have low product and user complexity, so that bottom left-hand corner, the customer success team's focus is to simplify. So simplify your customers' lives by making things so easy to understand and process. So, and typically I commonly see 2 mistakes when people are trying to use this matrix. The first mistake is that folks forget to put themselves in the shoes of the customer when thinking about product and user complexity. And so remember, the product and user complexity is in the eyes of the customer, not you. Just because you think your product is easy to use doesn't mean that your customers will necessarily agree. And then the second mistake that I see people make here is forgetting that things are all a spectrum. If you have something that's a medium user complexity, but definitely high complexity, then you're probably taking playbooks from both the automate and revolutionize quadrants. Of course, I go into more detail about each of these quadrants in my book, but I hope this helps to kind of set the stage a little bit. Again, without understanding how you fit into the customer's puzzle, you're going to be scaling in all sorts of different directions, which means that it's not as efficient and it's not, especially when you're scaling and there's so much going on. So, being rooted in understanding what your charter is will help a lot in those moments. Once you've understood your charter, the second focus is really to help champion the customer. And it really boils down to 2 things. First is executive buy-in and overall team buy-in. Of course, the more people that you have, the tougher it is. But even if you're a one-woman shop, this still needs to be done along with sharing this with every contractor, stakeholder that you work with. And why is executive buy-in so important? It's because if your leadership team doesn't fully understand the power of customer success and the potential that it has, it's going to be really tough for you to leverage and to get leverage, to get resources, to really help you and your team and your customers succeed. I think Emily Hayes puts it really well here. Show your executives how it could have been different if only someone had been paying closer attention. Don't just focus on this loss, show the potential. And I think, one of the primary power drivers with executive buy-in is that you can work cross-departmentally so much more smoothly when everyone's also along that same drumbeat. And that kind of ties into this next thing around customer-centric mindset, which, we talked a little bit here and there. And to quote my book here, to flourish, customer success must become the company mindset to unlock the biggest opportunities in business. So, we started talking a little bit about this, but when the customer success becomes that mindset within your company, not only will your customers be able to tell the difference, but you will too. And, you might be asking, well, why is that? It's because when there is that mindset, when you aren't in the room, say that product feature prioritization meeting or get that marketing value prop meeting, even when you aren't in the room, there's always someone there championing the customer. And this means that even when you're a small customer success team and even a team of one, your customer success function can still thrive. Remember, I hope these quick examples help to illustrate this, but without the buy-in and on the power of customer success, you're going to be spending a lot more energy when it comes to scaling, because you won't have that buy-in already. Lastly, once you've understood your charter and championed the customer and got that buy-in that you needed, the third focus is to really architect a complete customer experience. And this is complete in the sense that it's end-to-end, not in the sense that it's perfect. Because for sure, as we all know, this is an iterative process. So I think Christian summarized it really well here. If you want to stand out from the 83 other people that your client interacts with on a day-to-day basis, you must maintain a high level of geniality, even in the most insignificant of interactions. So we really need to be looking at the customer journey holistically, from the very beginning of what ad they see, or as early as possible, to, the point when they refer their friends after they've been with you for a few years or, even for a few days. By doing so, you can not only make sure that it flows well, but also keep notes on what areas may need more attention. We've also talked about, you probably have heard of developing a trusted advisor relationship with the customer and showing that your customers, that you care. And this is, this helps a lot with that. And again, if you don't understand, what that customer journey, customer experience is like, you're going to be building a plane while flying it, which is not great for your team when it comes to scaling. All right, great. And then now we have a rough idea of how focus can help us set those good foundations for customer success scaling, kind of going back to, we just have so much going on and not enough time. So that helps a little bit with that. Now let's go into another thing that, some of you guys also chose is executive buy-in for tech stack. We won't do a full poll for this, but how many of you guys have had issues getting executive buy-in for customer success tech stack? Go ahead and either put in the chat or emoji if you've had issues with this, either recently or you're currently having issues with this. All right, seeing a couple of thumbs. Oh, a lot of thumbs ups. Yeah. Or never worked with CS tech stack, a big issue. Yeah, this is actually something that even if you've never worked with a CS tech stack before, it's going to come up. Even when you have amazing buy-in, you still need to get executive buy-in for tech, especially when it's high budget items. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Yeah. And it really is important, and important that we continue to push this forward, as Catherine Blackmore puts it here. It really is time to marry our customer data with programs, technology, and automation. And in that case, it is really important that we work with our executives to get them to see this as well. And before we kind of dive too deep into it, I want to define tech stack a little bit more here, especially for those who've never worked with a CS tech stack before we go into how to kind of get that to scale. So when it comes to tech stack, you really want to supercharge your team by using tech efficiently. And there's really 4 main functions that you want to cover here. So the first is a CRM, the ability to manage accounts. Second is email automation, the ability to automate success. Third, data visualization, ability to understand trends. And then fourth is self-service help center. So ability for customers to quickly get that help. So, when you're small, I really recommend using your flexibility and adaptability to take advantage of the many free options that are out there for these things before graduating into more robust systems. This is not only for you to save on cost, but it's also better for you to understand how customer success can most efficiently function to hit objectives. And I think now in 2022, there's a lot of really great customer success technologies out there. There are low cost and flexible options for, customer success platforms, for example. And even before, talking to your leadership, you also should have a crystal clear clarity in your criteria for getting certain customer success tools. This is not only to help you, because sales folks are absolutely amazing at their jobs, and so you need to keep your eyes on the prize, but it's also because you need to be able to communicate that same clarity to your executives when you're getting that sign off. And there's really three important things that I consider when evaluating tech stack. And that is, what is your current process? What does your team need? And what is your customer value? I'm going to quickly elaborate more on each of these things because it can be unclear. So first is, what is your current process? It's really important to understand and feel comfortable with your process so you know that it works. Too often I see folks conforming into the technology instead of having the technology help them. So, examples of this is when you start seeing people, even outside the customer success sphere, say, oh, I can't do that because my system doesn't allow me to. We don't want that to happen to us. We want our technology to help empower us, help our customers as much as we can. And the other thing that's really important to understand our processes is we need to know if the process is or is not working. Because once we make that more efficient, we in order to make things more efficient, we have to understand what it is that we're trying to make more efficient. The second thing here is to understand, what does your team need? So we've probably all seen the problem where we have too many apps on our phone that we end up forgetting or underutilizing over half of them. So we don't want that problem to occur to our team, especially when, as many of us are heads of customer success, we don't want that to hurt our team, especially when each new tech item that we add is not only additional research time and budget, but also additional training and implementation time. So before you even start diving into the research, and after you understand your team's processes, understanding where are the biggest levers to help your team. Is it having more accessible data? Is it preparing for kickoff calls? Whatever it might be, we want to make sure that whatever tech you're bringing on actually addresses the needs of the team. Last but not least, the third one here, what is your customer value? So we talked a little bit about processes and we talked about team needs, but it's also, important to think about the customer. So, for example, we can have all the data, the visualization tools in the world, but if our customer wants to just understand how to reset their password, maybe we need to invest a little bit more time into a self-serve help center, for example. So these are just three things that you can go into when you're thinking about tech research, so that you have a lot more clarity and confidence. So I hope this framework helps a little bit as you approach your tech stack. And even when that's the case, you might be asking, why aren't all execs just jumping in and for customer success tech stack? Especially even when they have that executive buy-in. And I usually see three main reasons why they aren't. So the first one is we're not communicating in their language. First, and as customer success, we should all know this, we need to communicate in their language, and provide them with the context that they need to understand how a tool could help us. So for example, the other day I was working with a CEO who didn't know what a customer success platform was. And his first guess was Zendesk, and his second guess was Salesforce. And so, this is a really great example of how we need to ensure that we're all on the same page of what each tool is and why it matters. And they will also not know and understand the processes of customer success. So translate that for them as well, so that they will understand. So for example, instead of saying, oh yeah, it's going to help them prep for EBRs in a timely manner, they might be like, oh, okay, that sounds good, but I don't know what that is. Saying things like, we can build stronger key stakeholder relationships if we can provide clients with better, more actionable updates. And to do this at a scale, we need to evaluate this tool. You can see how that's a lot more, we're talking their language around scaling and building relationships and providing clients with better actionable updates. So, similarly, this goes for getting buy-in from other executives, not only, your CEO, your immediate boss, but also, how can this tool help marketing get more testimonials or leads for sales or even product feedback for product? How can you communicate the value that it will bring not only to your team, but for others? The second common reason why there's a lack of executive buy-in here is not communicating the ROI. Too often we are just putting them on the demo, be like, see, you can see the value yourself. But you're kind of using that last frame where you've already done that research, and based on that last bullet point, you've also been able to chat with other execs from other departments on why this is important. Well, you need to be crystal clear on that ROI as well. How will this help burn rate? How does this fit into your budget? For example, the most common CS example is that you can get a CSP or a customer success platform. And so perhaps with a CSP, each CSM can handle more accounts, and therefore you wouldn't need to grow your team as quickly, therefore saving time and energy spent into recruiting as well as headcount. Oftentimes, we typically put this into dollar numbers, such as, if this platform is $25K a year, this can unlock 50% more efficiency, which will save us 2 headcount in the next year. And 2 headcount alone would be more than $25K a year, so that you have a much more compelling argument. The last one is actually, last mistake I see here is probably one of the most common ones. Just like any of our other customer relationships, you need to show the value early and often. It's really important for your executive team to understand from a 10,000-foot perspective what is and isn't working for your team, and how they can help you unlock more. And by having these conversations early and often, again, at the high level perspective, when you do propose a tool, it isn't out of left field, and you also have advocates in the executive team that can help vouch for you. So I want to make sure that we have enough time for Q&A, but one last thing I want to talk about today is metrics. That is something that is another really, really important topic when it comes to scaling. So as much as I want to be able to say, this is definitely how if you're scaling a customer success team well, better by now that every team is different, every product is different, every company is different. So there isn't an easy way to say X metric will tell you exactly how you're doing. Yes, there are metrics like retention, expansions, NPS, but those metrics are more outcome focused, a little bit of lag. These measures things that happen after they happen, and while hopefully correlated, it actually doesn't tell you about the success of your team as you scale, and whether your team is actually doing a great job, or maybe your product is just so awesome that everyone's just, everyone loves it and is renewing, and it's not because your customer success team is doing much. So on this slide, I actually want to talk about how I've thought about metrics as I've scaled and currently scaling my team to help me better understand how customer success is doing instead of what our outcomes are. This means that I'm not tracking those other metrics. It just means this is how I am focusing my time. So the first thing is that, well, as I was just saying, have focused metrics. So, like we were adding focus to our customer success organizations that we're talking about a little bit earlier, we also want to add focus to our metrics. It's so easy to get bogged down by, hundreds of metrics if we wanted to, and we want to make sure that we're focusing our efforts on, I usually recommend like 3 metrics to start off. Eventually, your team's going to get bigger, and as your customer success organization matures, you can ramp that up to 5, then 10, and so on and so forth. What I always recommend to folks, especially early on, is not to have a ton of metrics. You want to have 3 that you can really focus on, and you want to make them a little bit earlier on in the process. Typically, I like to see an adoption metric. How do you make sure that folks are getting onto your platform? Secondly, I like to see an engagement metric. How do you know if folks are still using it time after time? And thirdly, how do you know if folks are coming back? What commitment are they making? So typically, you see this as renewals or something similar, like a pilot renewal or a trial churn or something like that. So because again, I want to make sure that we're focusing on slightly earlier metrics, because if they're not onboarding properly, they're also probably not renewing. So that's why I would put a little bit more focus there. This ties into my second bullet point, which is graduate metrics early and often. What I mean by that is to keep moving metrics along. So don't be shy to what I call graduate from metrics. For example, for my adoption metric, I can say my very first version is to have people sign into the platform. Great. If only 20% of people are signing on right now, I want to get that number high as possible, maybe to 90% or whatever percentage makes sense for my product before I feel comfortable graduating. And then graduation can then maybe look at customer sign-ins, and then they have to click 2 buttons, or because if they click those 2 buttons, they're more set up for success. I think using a concrete example might help. So I assume a lot of people here use Slack. So if I were Slack, my first adoption metric could be a Slack login. And then I might graduate into looking at people who sent their first message. Then I might graduate to looking at the number of people who have joined at least 3 channels or whatever that is. So you can start seeing graduate metrics so that you're going towards that North Star and really understanding what's going on. Ties into my last point here. There you go. We want to use metrics to reflect on how the business is evolving. So scaling organizations grow quickly. It goes really, really quickly. And so it's really important to understand how the business, the customer success business, your company's business, your customer's business is evolving as you scale. But a hyperbolic example, but if you stay stuck in I'm always a high touch customer success function mentality, without realizing that your data is showing you that your customers don't care that you're high touch, you might be scaling the wrong direction. So you want to make sure that you keep using these metrics to reflect on how your business is evolving. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. So it is at least 9:03 where I am. I want to make sure we have more than enough time to talk, to do some Q&A. That's always the most exciting part for all of us. And I already see there's a couple of questions in the chat. So love. Keep going. Keep adding more and more questions to that. I know I covered a lot today in our conversation, from mistakes in setting up your customer success foundation for scaling, how you can avoid that, how to get executive buy-in for your tech stack that you need as you grow, and also how to think of metrics as you scale so that you're not focused on only the outcomes of your hard work, but also using those metrics to help evolve your organization as your company scales. So let's definitely continue this conversation in our Q&A right now. Also, I'm on this slide. My contact info is up here as well. Let's definitely connect on LinkedIn. And also a link to my book, The Startup's Guide to Customer Success, is there as well, as available on Amazon, ebook, and paperback. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Arena for some Q&A.
Yes, I started gathering the questions in the question tab. I think we can start with Mimi. You should see the question on the screen. What are the examples of non-outcome focused metrics?
Yeah. So non-outcome focused metrics. I mean, this is where, when I say outcome focused, it's more like, retention, churn, things at the very end of that is the outcome. But then something that are a little bit not as outcome focused is, how many people are, using the service day after day? How many people are coming? And yes, you could argue that those are a little bit more, those are technically still an outcome. You can argue that all of them are outcomes, but I'm not here to argue semantics, but more so about, what is something that is a result of a lot of things going on, or what is a metric that focuses on what are those things that are going on? Are they logging into, that step 4 of your product at a reasonable time? And how does that, and then, being able to tie that back in, with, your churn, your retention, things like that. I think another one is also customer sentiment is another example of non-outcome focused metrics. Customer sentiment is such an important thing. Keeping that pulse on customers of hey, we have maybe one of our stakeholders is about to retire or whatever it is. And just that's not necessarily a metric that you need to make sure that all customers are X, but it is something that you need to start focusing on, especially, earlier on when you don't know what is going on, with your customers or whether or not you're scaling properly. It's really looking at those sentiments. So I think those are some examples of non-outcome focus metrics.
Super. Another question. As a company, I feel we always want to work on new clients, new product, new ideas, but we don't focus too much on fixing current issues with a hamper customer success a lot. Any suggestions here?
Yeah, typically when I see this, it's because, there is a lack of internal stakeholder buy-in or executive buy-in. Why is why are folks not interested in fixing current issues, which is hampering customer success? Do they understand the power of customer success? And if we're able to really provide a good experience, aka not a super buggy experience, that actually helps them and helps the business even more. And then so I would actually like dig in a little bit there of figuring out how they feel about customer success, how they view these current issues, especially if they're really, really big issues. We can always talk about like the little bug here or whatever, but like, fundamental, core product issues or core customer experience issues or core sales issues, whatever it is. That tells me that there's something a little bit off in terms of the buy-in, and making sure that not only you have executive buy-in, so not only your CEO, COO, and all that stuff, but also, does product understand? Does engineering understand? Does marketing understand? Making sure that we're all on that same page, so that you can make that case of, hey, that big issue that we have right now, we should actually focus that, because that can unlock even more opportunities, more so than that shiny new thing over there. So that's kind of what I say, and that's kind of what I'm seeing here in this question. Hopefully that helps.
For a typical SaaS company, what will you recommend as a proper ratio of paid customers to a customer success manager to drive efficiency and avoid things falling through the cracks?
Yeah, great question. So this is where, it really depends. And, I know this is like not the best answer, but it really depends on what your product is and what your users are. So going back to that product complexity, user complexity matrix earlier, that will help you determine what that ratio should be. So what I mean by that is, and I can try to go back to that slide too. Okay. What I mean by that is that if your product complexity is higher, your ratio is going to be, a lower ratio. You might, you might be like 1 to 10, hyperbolically speaking, or even 1 to 2, even more hyperbolically speaking, because, your product is just so complex. But of course, you also have to understand where your users are and kind of that user complexity of like, how does this tie into their day-to-day? Do they want to build a relationship with you because you're a really, really core product to them, and they don't want to, have anything happen between you and your product? They want to really have a really good relationship? Or are you a set it forget it vendor for them? Are you just helping automate a lot of things and simplify their life so that they can just move on with their day? And that really helps you figure out whether you need to do more high touch, medium touch, low touch, tech touch. And then that will help determine your ratio to paid customers to a customer success manager to help really drive efficiency. So typically you see with tech touches, you're getting to like 1 to 1,000, things like that. For really, really high touch, that's where you see your 1 to 50s. I've seen even 1 to 20s. I've seen 1 to 100s for even high touch. And that's because you really want to develop those relationships with your customers, and that's why it's more high touch. Oh, while we're on that point, high touch, low touch, tech touch, it doesn't mean you have to do just one. If you're doing high touch things, you can still do a little bit of tech touch. But what we mean by high touch is that you're doing more high touch. Hopefully that helps.
We have a question from Zach. How do you approach customer communication when your platform is down for more than 24 hours? Who should be sending mass communication? How often should we communicate what's going on? This is for a product that is high complexity across the board.
Oh, wow. I mean, if it's high complexity across the board, I would wonder why your platform is down for more than 24 hours, especially since, as a customer success leader, I would want to make sure that my engineering team knows, like, hey, if this goes down, it's going down, like on our side as well. And so that's a little bit weird, but this is where, who should be sending mass communications? It really depends on your company, how big it is. Typically, I would say it's usually on more the customer success side, because you want to keep that, you want to maintain that relationship. What I've seen folks do actually is like have it come from, their CSM, so that they can have that conversation. It seems a lot more personal, that they understand, like, especially when it's super high, user complexity, and like, Salesforce goes down and like, oh no, like I was supposed to close a huge deal today or something. For that, you want to make sure that folks know and folks understand, and what's going on, what you're doing to help. And, that's where you want to be a lot more, high touch, so to speak, and really curate that experience. Maybe Salesforce is not the best example there because it's super SaaS, but I currently work in like the agriculture company, or I work in agriculture industry for an agriculture company, and we deal with a lot of farmers' livelihoods, and when crops go bad, or crop yields are really good, or anything like that, like they care a lot, and so we need to make sure that we're communicating things super clearly. We have next steps. It's super clear what we are asking them to do. Like for us, that high touch is really, really important when it comes to, if something's down for 24 hours. Thankfully, it hasn't been the case, but if something were to happen, I would probably have the customer success managers, and obviously we'd automate that. But yeah, I would probably do something along those lines. And how often? I think this is where it really depends on how many different ways, like how often this is happening. If it's happening really, really often and people are really pissed off, this is where you probably need to, have like a site. I know you've probably seen a lot of those, like status at slack.com or status.salesforce.com, where you can log in and see the status. And you can see that they are typically updating every 15 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what the severity of the situation is. And then being able, even if you're still having that high touch mass communication, being able to be like, hey, I will keep you in the loop. This is where you can also check, making sure that they are feeling as comfortable as possible in this situation like this. It's really, really tough. But yeah, to kind of summarize, first figure out why this happened in the first place. I know things happen, but want to make sure that folks, especially in the engineering side of teams know that if something's that's super high complexity, this is really important. This should never really happen. And then, when it comes to mass communication, understanding, how do you want to build that relationship? How do you want to build that trusted advisor relationship? And how does this play into that? And then also, making sure that the communication aligns with the relationship type that you're working with.
A question from Katie. She says, great presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Katie.
From my side. When building out the CS function from a project point of view, what tools do you use to help project manage and how progress to leadership tip?
Yeah. So at the very beginning, this is where we had to talk in the leadership team's, lingo. What is the language that they like? What language do they speak? Not just like English versus like, Spanish or something, but more so like what did they care about? Why do they want to know progress on this? And like what matters most to them, and also what help do you need from them? And then how can you make sure that they know those things? So most of the time, it could be, it depends on your leadership. Some leadership teams tend to be a lot more like, hey, I trust you, you got it. I'm going to just like keep me posted once a week. And then there's folks that are like, I want to know every single little detail. And so find that tool that works best. I've seen, Gantt charts. I've seen, Google spreadsheets to keep things simple. So you don't want a huge thing. But I've also seen people use like, the Asanas and Trellos and things like that as well. I would say like, again, kind of going back to understanding what language they're speaking, what do they care about, and what do you need, what type of things do you need help from them? So like, for example, like I need help for sign off or whatever it is. So they have a heads up of how they can best help you. So that's kind of like what I recommend. I also, to be honest, sometimes, especially when it's, super, super important, they want to be in the weeds. Sometimes it's not a tool and it's just a meeting. And then you just have like a meeting doc. And then you just put, 15 minutes on the calendar or something like that so that you can check in.
Another question from Prince. Would you recommend customer success actively engaging in monthly renewal of paid subscription, or is that a sales focused task?
Yeah, I think this has been kind of going back to this little chart here from my book. It depends on the product complexity and the user complexity. So the reason why customer success should engage in a monthly renewal of paid subscriptions is when, maybe it's like really, really high complexity, high product complexity or high user complexity. And that's because you want to build that relationship with them and also leverage that relationship that you have with them to talk about their renewal. I would typically say if you're high touch, I would then question why it's a monthly renewal, but that's a separate story. And then if it's especially with monthly, you may want to think a little bit more about tech side, or like a tech touch side, because that is pretty frequent. In terms of sales, I think sales will come in if it's a lot more transactional, and that's not that's because sales has so many things going on that we want to make sure that we're also leveraging them for everything that they do so well, but also just kind of balancing like who do we want to build a relationship with our customer, and how do we make that super clear? This is possibly a really good example of using tech touch customer success, so that you can at least have that keep building that relationship.
One, I think, last question that we have published is going from a team from 1 to people to, let's say, 5 or more can be challenging. Any advice on how to handle this part? How you move from being a one-man show into actually building a team around you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is such a great question and something that I've definitely made mistakes on as I was growing my first team. And so I love that you're asking this. So when it comes to growing from 1 to 2 to 5 or more, and I'm assuming these are all CS people, not the whole company. There's a really great kind of framework that I use from Andreessen Horowitz, the VC, where they use it for sales, but I think it applies very much to customer success as well, which they call this the Renaissance sales rep. Again, they use it for a sales context. And the Renaissance sales rep, for folks who aren't familiar, is essentially sorry, I was looking at the chat, is essentially, your first 1 to 2 people are folks who are, jack of all trades, just, really hungry to really figure out processes and build things and break things and, rebuild them and, that can thrive in that ambiguity. And then once you get to like that 5 and more, when you're starting to scale, you actually go away from the Renaissance hire and the Renaissance sales rep or customer success manager or something like that, because once you're at 5, you're starting to build a lot more processes. So you need people who are a lot more operational, like efficiency focused, instead of people who are really great at dealing with ambiguity. So first, I would say that because you want to make sure that you bring in the right people, especially when you're scaling. Bad hires can really, really hurt you. And when I say bad, it doesn't mean that they're bad, people, but more so that it just doesn't fit for your company or your needs or their career trajectory or whatever it is. So yeah, so I think first, really understanding like what type of person that you need and how you bring that person in. Do you need someone who is really good at dealing with ambiguity? Do you need someone who's really good at efficiency? Do you need someone who comes from industry or is really good at customer success or whatever it is? Like being really crystal clear on how you're hiring, because that is always like probably the most challenging part is, and like the most hurtful thing is bringing in the wrong hire. It could be the right hire at a later time or a different time, but it was the wrong hire at the moment. So that's like the biggest thing. And once you have that team, I think as a manager, as a head of customer success, is really understanding how you can unlock the most potential possible, especially when you're dealing with 1 to 5 team members. That's where I highly recommend meeting with everyone on a regular basis, so you understand what they're dealing with, what they're working on, what I call in my one-on-ones, what are the hot topics of the week? What is really on their mind? What are they spending the most energy and effort on? Because that will help me better understand, how my team is thinking of moving customer success objectives forward, but also how can I help unblock them? How can I help uncover a lot of the data points or the tasks that they need to do or whatever it is, how can I help unblock? Because once you're getting to 5, it really is all about like, how can you help unblock things? Is it, hopefully not, but is sales bringing in a bunch of bad fit customers? And like, maybe your thing to best unblock is not to hire more people because there's more customers, but really to like work with sales and figure out what's going on. Or is it to get a new tool? Going back to our tech stack conversation, better understanding what that is. So yep, that was a lot of different advice, but hopefully that helps. And I'm really, really excited for you, by the way.
So we have 2 more questions. As a startup, our culture is very open, approachable, and hardworking. But at client end, it is extremely laid back, slow, and bureaucratic. Any tricks on how to tackle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's really that's really interesting. And I like that is at least, open, approachable, hardworking instead for yourself instead of instead of the other way around, because that'd be something if you were extremely laid back, slow, and bureaucratic. So I think you're really in a good position. How do you tackle that? Yes, they can be laid back, slow, and bureaucratic, but like, how can we give them structure to help them realize and motivate them to hit shared customer goals, right? And what I mean by that is sometimes when they're extremely laid back and slow and bureaucratic, maybe they need a little bit more structure and a little bit more clarity of why we need to get things done by when. And so maybe a shared, implementation playbook would be really, really important here. Or, maybe it also could be a lack of a customer champion at that client. Yeah, they could be extremely laid back and slow and bureaucratic, but who is really pushing things forward there and really understanding who's that key stakeholder, even if it's not the person with the purse strings, And I think if you have a culture that's very open, approachable, and hardworking, you can really be able to pinpoint that pretty quickly and then build around that. So that would probably be my trick to tackle that. It seems like if they're extremely laid back, slow, and bureaucratic, how do we help them and give them the context that they need so that we can hit customer goals and achieve more with them.
Question from Abby. Hi, Jennifer. What is your suggestion for scaling the onboarding with a low-touch strategy for a high-user, low-product complexity scenario? What mistakes do we look out for if we are pursuing automation to get our customers running quickly during this phase without losing the personal touch?
Yeah. So high user complexity, lower product complexity, high user complexity. Okay, so we're in that delight category right here. There you go. You can't see my cursor. Never mind. So we're in that delight category and that quadrant. So yeah, you typically are looking into more automation on that side, and that's just because there's a lot going on. It's a lot easier to understand. So when you send that email that says, hey, when you click on this button, this is what will happen, most people understand that, and it's not too hard. So yeah, when it comes to scaling, sorry, I'm going to do the first question first. When it comes to scaling onboarding with that low touch strategy, yeah, I think that's why you have to really understand your customer. Again, going back to a common mistake that I'm seeing when people use this matrix, you can be on the spectrum. It doesn't have to be your always high complexity, or it's not binary. It's not you have either high or low complexity, user complexity. It's somewhere on that spectrum. So I would better pinpoint as you are scaling onboarding where they are on that user complexity side. Is it that they absolutely care? The example I always use is, a dog walking service. Like if something happens to my dog, I want to know right now, sort of thing. Versus, is it like high user complexity, but like, it's not the end of the world. So, something that's very, very high, but something I wouldn't necessarily, be super scared. It would be like something like Slack, super high user. I care a lot about what I do on Slack. I use it all the time, but at the same time, like if it were to go down, I don't know, but I can breathe. Like I can still live my day. So like better understanding how you scale like where you are on that user complexity, and like how did they react to certain things, either when things go really wrong or when things go really well. So, and then mistakes to look out for when you're pursuing automation, to get customers running quickly during this phase without losing their personal touch. Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head right there. Is that, you know, how can you automate while having that personal touch? So, you know, this is beyond just, you know, like just put, instead of having it come from support at company.com, having come from like arena at company.com. There's, yeah, it's beyond that, right? Like, we all know that personal touch is more than just changing email, having their name in the email and things like that. It's like, how are you still building in and again, remember this quadrant is delight. How are we still building in delight in all of that? You know, so for example, not to use a dog walking service, but that's just very pertinent in my life. For example, sometimes sometimes I get a text, you know, kind of like a little bit out of the blue, that there's an automation of a picture of my dog just like being super happy in the park. I love that. You know, that was absolutely wonderful. That's a personal touch. It took maybe 2 seconds on their time. It was completely automated. I know it was completely automated, but it brought me a lot of delight, gave me a lot of confidence, and built that kind of, even though it wasn't with a real person, or I guess it was with a dog walker, but it wasn't, you know, I was still communicating through a platform. I was able to build that trust with them. So there's like different ways to automate without losing that personal touch. So definitely think a little bit creatively. And so yeah, don't get stuck in the, oh, just personalize the name every single time. Like, do more than that.
The last question. I work for a company with a large team of CSMs, think around 100, with a sales team of over 400. What would you advise on how to deal with salespeople who move their work to CSMs, although it doesn't fall into the CSM bucket?
Oh yeah, wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, you know, sales folks are just dumping the work on the CSMs. But this is where, you know, you kind of going back to buy-in. This is where you need your executive buy-in, but also sales team buy-in. Or when I say sales team, I typically am referring to sales leadership, because that tells me that something is not, we're not on the same page. And so I would probably, if I were the head of customer success there, I would be focusing and making, you know, that would be a huge priority for me of unblocking 100 CSM's work, is for me to talk with the head of sales and better understand, hey, this is the problem I'm seeing. Here are some examples. Here are some solutions that I think I want to work with you to figure out how we can, you know, either improve our processes so that we can unlock a lot more efficiencies on both of our sides. You know, understand what is the root cause of this. It's not, and of course, none of this is to put blame. It's more about, you know, how can we move forward so that we're providing a much better customer experience, which will not only help sales, but also help CS. So I think I would really much focus on that. Yeah, again, very tough situation. I completely feel for you, and hopefully you'll get out of that soon, but get that buy-in and get the executive team buy-in. When I say executive team, not just the C-suite, all the leaders across the board and all the different departments.
I think that's a wrap. And thank you, Jennifer, for being our awesome guest and for a very inspirational presentation that you did for us. Thank you all the ones who joined. It was a pleasure having you all here, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thanks, guys, and definitely connect with me. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you all. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.